This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. So much of your personal info is out of your control, like your insurance provider that has your social security number and your favorite retailer that has your payment details. If they get breached, your information, your identity, is vulnerable. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
His scripted lines are showing that he has not even listened to the budget himself. So I will try a different question. Perhaps he can give something that is unscripted to the people watching. Farmers across the United Kingdom. Mr. Speaker.
If she's going to complain about scripted answers, it's probably best not to read that from a script. What I will say about farmers is this: I'm glad she's raised.
Quiet Riot. Welcome, Quiet Rioters, to another Sunday school, the salad bar to Thursday's carvery. I'm Alex Andreou.
And I'm Naomi Smith, the mathematician to Alex's philosopher.
Now, I want to start with a plea for your support. I think Trump's win proves one of the really basic theses Naomi and I had in setting this thing up, that the coming fight is not right versus left. The coming fight is reason against unreason. The coming fight will require us to build bridges and build alliances with a lot of reasonable people, all the way from the left to the right. The dividing line is not your preference of economic policy or whether you want a big state or a small state. The coming divide is whether you believe in easy solutions that appeal to people's ugliest side, or whether you believe in reason and science and expertise and facts. And that's why this podcast exists, to bring down the temperature and throw light, not heat, onto issues. So if you find that you are listening to us a lot, that we've become your go-to podcast, which is really, really lovely, and you can afford it, please head over to ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod and give us either a one-off little donation or subscribe to us with a monthly stipend. We will be forever grateful. In fact, we're organizing a little Ask Anything Zoom for all our Ko-Fi members, where you get to quiz Naomi and I on any topic you wish. Questions unseen. Chatham House rules, obviously, because we may say quite a lot of naughty things. And it can be anything, political, personal, whatever you want. I mean, we reserve the right not to answer. But you can ask.
You can ask him who he voted for in the Tory leadership election. He ain't going to tell you.
Yeah, so that'll happen before the holidays. We're setting that up for late November, early December. And we will send out details to everyone in the next week or so. So it's important to sign up now if you can, and then you will get details of that in a little email shot.
And we'll be doing another editorial meeting in Q1 of 2025.
That's
That's where we get all of our supporters together and we really allow them to give us a steer on the content that they want coming out of the podcast. The last one was supremely well attended, but much more to the point, the quality of ideas and feedback that came from our supporters was invaluable. So if you basically want to be on the editorial board of Quiet Riot, do sign up as a supporter and then you'll get a chance to feed into all of our plans for next year.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've done maybe 6 bonus episodes that were based on ideas from that meeting. We've ditched one of the regular features and started another one, again based on that meeting. And several more bonus episodes have come from ideas from our Discord channel, which has been incredibly lively.
Yeah.
So if you can, do sign up and we'll see more of each other in the coming few weeks. Now, Naomi, how are you feeling after what was quite a big couple of weeks?
I'm okay. My overriding feeling is, here we go again. And that is a privileged position to be able to take. At Best for Britain, a lot of my staff are very young and they weren't politically active or even able to vote in 2016.
Blimey, that young.
They were starting university in lockdown in 2019 and were consumed by that rather than the general election then. So this is their first big loss. They haven't really felt this emotion previously of utter defeat and dejection and how the hell could this have happened and what to make of the other people in the world that are so supportive of people whose values are antithetical to the reason why I get out of bed in the morning. So my overriding feeling is, here we go again. We've done it before. We're going to have to do it again. But it's tiring and it's dejecting. But I have to say, the strength I've drawn from our listeners and supporters has been a huge balm. It has helped so much. The chat on our Discord channels is truly nourishing. It's where our people are. We've built this incredible community. And you've said it before, but both Matthew and Mark, who are our guests on our first live recording on Wednesday, said that they've never been on a show where the feedback has been so generous and supportive.
I know,
and
isn't that amazing?
To all of our listeners, and I'm so grateful that they're there and that we've got our people and we're huddling together through a difficult time and figuring out how to fix it.
It is incredible. They've become a real asset to us.
Yeah.
Our listeners, in terms of, attracting top quality guests, because what's emerged, like every single time after a guest's been on, is that they've never had this level of engagement. Like they go on big TV shows and they don't get this level of engagement. And certainly they don't get this level of friendly, open engagement, whether I agree or disagree. And so it's become a really notable feature and I'm very, very proud of it.
How are you feeling?
I mean, is it completely awful to say that there is a big part of me that feels a sense of relief that at least it's
over,
done and we know? It just felt like the last few months, especially since the attempt on his life, which was, that's it, he's definitely won the next election. And then, of course, Kamala Harris came along and gave everyone a lot of hope and seemed to be doing much better. And she did, she did do much better. But it's been such a roller coaster that actually the biggest part of me is probably feeling relief that we now know what we're dealing with for the next 5 years. The picture is quite clear, both domestically and in the US. However ugly the current situation, it is still a firmer footing than not knowing. Look, I'm relatively philosophical, I guess, as a person anyway, because there's always a small part of me that is a little bit detached and interested in why did this happen and how do the mechanics of it work. And I think that helps me a lot to deal with difficult situations.
We'll get into that, won't we, on this show?
Yeah, because however horrible the situation, there's still a part of you that's interested in how and why.
Indeed.
But I'm really, really conscious not to do the thing that international progressives do when they get hugely involved in another country's politics, not to underestimate the importance of Trump to the rest of the world. But I also don't want to take away from the proper grief and terror that people living in that country must be feeling right now, in order to make it all about me and my dashed hopes for Kamala Harris, because that is a smidgen compared to what a trans person might be feeling, or a woman who just got news that she's pregnant in Texas, or, So, you have to keep a sense of perspective with these things.
You do, and thank God we've got each other to talk to. So we are going to get into a bit more of the US election fallout, probably for many months to come. But it was a big week at home too, so we're going to talk about Kemi Badenoch and her new shadow cabinet, her first PMQs, and we're going to talk about a bit of turmoil happening over the Channel and over the Irish Sea, with 2 impending elections happening one in Germany, one in Ireland.
All this and more ahead.
Quiet, riot. So, more Trump 2.0. He's back, die hard with a vengeance. Part of me, when I was listening to the Biden speech yesterday, wanted him to just go, I'm resigning and I'm announcing Kamala Harris as the 47th president of the US. Give her a shot at 2 months of being the president of the USA, the first woman of color to lead the country. Wouldn't that have just been delightful? But look, I get it. His signal was, unlike in 2020, there will be a peaceful transition of power. Look at all of the wonderful stuff I've done. You're not feeling the effects of it yet because it takes time to come through. And when it does, please remember that it was me that put the wheels in motion on that and not the
No one will, I'm afraid.
No, they won't.
Trump will come in January and claim that everything that's going on in the economy is his doing. We know that.
What did you make of maybe him and also Harris's speech?
To be honest, I'm not sure. I like the fact that they're pointing out the difference.
Yeah.
That there is now a normality in the handover, and they will be gracious basically to someone who was incredibly ungracious to them. But there's also a sense that they're assuming a little bit of a supine position.
Yeah.
Because they know what's coming up is very, very hard. I haven't really processed all of it yet. I think it will take a little bit of time. I was chatting to Brian Klaas the other day. He will be on the show soon, listeners, but he's a little bit too bruised right now to come and talk about it. He's taking a little bit of time off, and we absolutely respect that and look forward to his insight when he's
self-care is
back
so
in
important.
the fold in a few weeks. Yeah.
I found that both speeches were really not for me. They were for Americans, and I found them, as a Brit, quite saccharine and not what I needed to hear in that moment, but I
mean, you can guarantee that, right?
Yeah.
The template is Ron Howard, Roland Emmerich. Can I tell you, it was always my least favorite bit of The West Wing when military drumming started in the background because President Bartlett was building to some big
State of the Nation address
speech. Yeah, I always felt quite overtly manipulated. But horses for courses. What about the data? You've been having a look at some of the weird features, right?
Because that's me. I'm a pragmatist activist when it comes to my kind of, brain style. So I go straight to data, straight to, right, what the fuck went wrong? Let's look at it. And there was a YouGov poll that really rang alarm bells, and that is the number of happy young men. So they polled people, they did it by demographic, age group, and gender. And young men aged 18 to 29, 60% of them are thrilled or happy with the outcome of Trump's win. And this decreases rapidly, with gender and age. But that really concerned me. What is it that these young men are hearing, and why do they feel so happy about this? I think the political classes are far too out of touch with the informational space that these kinds of voters occupy. And we have to know much better what pro-Trump Republican arguments have been cutting through to them and how the messages have been magnified. Why do I get concerned about this? Well, because I've been absorbing a lot of the criticisms that have been coming from the Democratic movement, whether it's criticizing Biden for not stepping down sooner, whether they're criticizing Harris for not having a good enough command of the economy being the big issue. And I think that is failing to understand who is listening to what and where they are consuming that and in what format. I think that is fascinating for progressives around the world, because it is places like Twitch, YouTube, and long form podcast. Now, some of the people like Aidan Ross, he's only now on YouTube because he got banned from Twitch from using the N-word too much, but he has 4.5 million subscribers on YouTube. If I was to put in front of anyone in the political class in this country, or in America probably, whether they are elected officials, donors, senior advisors or civil servants, the top most followed and subscribed to and listened to by young people accounts, and ask them to put their hand up when they recognize one of the names. I know in my bones, none of them would raise their hand for any of them.
Yeah.
And that matters. It matters hugely, and we're getting it really, really wrong. And the right got this, and they got it very, very effectively in the Trump circles.
There is not enough, I think, relationship building from progressives. What do I mean by that? If you listen to Rogan or watch Jordan Peterson or follow Elon Musk for years and years, you develop a relationship of trust with them. So when they then turn around and say you should vote for X, it sounds like this is coming from someone that you trust and there isn't some other agenda behind it. And I think what tends to happen with a lot of progressives and their celebrity proxies is that they only activate around election time.
Yeah.
They only reach out around election time to say, vote for us because it's very, very important, not having built that long-term relationship.
Well, we saw that in the Brexit referendum. There were focus groups after Beckham made a comment. I listened to those focus groups and people were saying, you know, I'm football mad me. I've supported Manchester United my whole life. So did my dad, so did my granddad. But what does that posh tosser know about getting your kid into an oversubscribed school and having to drive 5 miles out of your way to drop them off somewhere else? What does he know about trying to get a GP appointment? He doesn't. He's out of touch. He drives sports cars and buys his healthcare and education. Whereas these right-wing celebrities are in the trenches throughout, whether their day job is being a tech bro or a comedian, but they are making political content constantly.
I mean, the flip side of that is people like Gary Neville or Gary Lineker, for that matter, who do actually regularly engage politically. And so it's not weird when they have a view on something. I think that's the point.
We just need more of them. And we do have to get on top of it because here in the UK, 12% of 18 to 24-year-old men and 15% of 25 to 49-year-old men voted Reform UK in the 2024 general election. I know 20-something women in my own family who voted Reform because they felt that these were people telling them something authentic that was chiming with their overall view that all politicians are the same. And we are not all politicians. We are different. If you hate politics, vote for us.
The other side of that is that actually, demographically, I've looked at some analysis of the vote, and the only age group that voted overwhelmingly for Trump were Generation X, mid-40s to late 50s. So he was in a minority with every single other age group. So your
generation, Alex.
Yeah, including older people, actually, which I find very interesting because I think there was something going on there with women of that age. They overwhelmingly supported Kamala Harris, even white women, which in other age groups broke very slightly for Trump. But I think there was something very specific to women that were of an age where they remembered the world pre-Roe v. Wade versus that being simply a theoretical possibility.
Yeah.
But it was that age group, it was my age group that screwed the country. You know, what's their excuse?
Quiet, Riot.
The other really interesting feature was how much lower the overall vote was.
Yeah.
There were record registrations, record early voting, massive queues everywhere on the day of the election. So what the hell happened there?
I don't know.
I mean, one possibility. One possibility is that Trump really was screwed in 2020.
Well, one possibility is that the pollsters who almost entirely called it wrong suppressed the Democrat vote. People thought she'd won and they didn't feel that they had to go out. And, you know, if you were sort of reluctantly Dem, because you hated Trump so much, but weren't particularly drawn to the offering from Harris, then you thought, oh, well, she's probably going to win anyway, doesn't need my help.
Yeah, but 15 million's worth? I don't know. I find that really peculiar.
Yeah.
I think that is worth extensive study and a bonus episode in the months to come, because I'm sure data scientists will be looking at that.
Exactly. I wanted to ask you about the other races, House of Reps and Senate, where Trump has got a small majority. Okay, executive powers.
Maybe it's not confirmed yet, but
exactly. But at the time of recording, that is what it's looking like the outcome will be. We know he loves an executive order. We know that meme where he holds the piece of paper up and you can write anything on it and ha ha ha. But he will need funding to do it. He will need to get budgets through those houses. Am I grasping at straws here? Or, are there enough moderates left within the GOP to stop him from some of the worst things he might want to try and do?
Look, maybe there are, maybe there aren't. But politicians, especially experienced politicians, are good at leveraging power.
Yep.
That's what they do. They're power brokers, right? Especially Republicans. And so if he ends up with a situation where he's got a majority of 2 in the Senate and a tiny handful, like 3 or 4 in the House of Representatives, to the public at large who doesn't pay very close attention, it looks like this is it. He's got the House, he's got the presidency, he's got the Senate, he's got the House of Representatives, he's got the Supreme Court. So nothing should be stopping him from implementing all the stuff that he promised. And he promised a whole load of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And if he ends up in a situation where all it takes is a couple of people in one of the 2 houses to frustrate his efforts, because things like his mass deportation program, I saw one estimate that's going to cost like 60 billion a year. And that's not including the damage it will do to the economy, right?
Indeed.
This is just the number of people required to operationalize it. If Congress turns around and says, we ain't giving it to you unless you give us X, then he might end up in a situation where there is the perception that he has absolute power, but actually he gets quite frustrated. That will be interesting to watch, I guess. The other thing that I would pick out as a possible fly in his ointment is, of course, his age, Naomi. His supporters only like him.
Yep.
They really dislike proxies, anyone he appoints. They dislike even his children. They blame his children constantly for anything that goes wrong. They say, oh, that was Junior's choice or Ivanka's choice. And I think succession is a really massive, massive problem. Like, he's built this huge Trumpism MAGA movement, and I'm not sure he can bequeath it to anyone.
I don't either. I think the goodwill of voters to be extended to his heirs, whether they are directly his own offspring or anyone that he may be bringing on and talent nurturing, which, let's face it, he fucking won't, is so unlikely to be able to command anywhere near the level of support that he has as an individual, means that we really shouldn't have any excuse to not win the next presidential election. But my God, the Democrats have got to get their house in order and get behind somebody good. One thing I'd spotted after we recorded on Wednesday was Dominic Cummings. Sorry to mention that name, everybody, but he was blathering on about polling from 2022 where they'd polled extensively who could beat Trump. And the only name that ever won was Pete Buttigieg. And I wonder if that's why he was slow to endorse Harris, because he knew that polling. He knew that nobody but him was even vaguely close to being able to beat Trump, and wanted to have the proper race and for the party to choose somebody. And I have seen this time and time again where coronations do fail because there is something about proving your ability to campaign in an internal race that shows you the character of the person that might be able to then take that campaign to the country. So they are going to have to go back over that whole process.
I adore Mayor Pete, as you know.
Yeah, I do know.
So we will see what happens there. I mean, I think there is also a danger of overreacting a little bit. Here's another interesting thing in the stats. There was a gap between the dislike of Trump and vote for Trump. What do I mean by that? Most of the exit polling that I've seen shows there was still a 7 to 8% of voters who disapprove of Trump and still voted for him. There's even like a 3% of voters who thought he was too extreme and still voted for him. And so I wonder if we're slightly lionizing Trump's victory. And given the economic fundamentals and the long period of high inflation and, you know, how people felt the economy was doing for them after the pandemic, whether actually a more reasonable candidate than Trump, who was less polarizing, would have won an even bigger victory, would have won a sort of Reagan-like tsunami. And I think that's actually a very, very likely scenario. So, like I said, we need to dive into the data, I think, before jumping onto easy diagnosis.
We've been sitting around here for the last couple of weeks, and the story that was portrayed was not true. I mean, we were told Puerto Rico was going to change the election. Liz Cheney, Nikki Haley voters, women lying to their husbands. Before that, it was Tim Walz in the camo hats. Night after night after night, we were told all these things and gimmicks were going to somehow push Harris over the line, and we were just ignoring the fundamentals.
I've seen a lot of people sharing that Scott Jennings rant on CNN that's like, we didn't listen to people. And, you know, you're not looking at some washout. Like, the election was relatively close, and considering where we were after that debate with Biden, and especially after the attempt on Trump's life, I mean, all those commentators seem to forget that 4 months ago they were saying, that's it, election over, he will win by 70%. And so now it's like 53-47 or whatever, and they're going, oh my goodness, you know, the Democratic Party just needs to set itself on fire and hope it grows again. So just take a breath and let's see what comes out from the actual facts as they emerge over the next few weeks and months. One last thing I wanted to bring up that's not directly related, but we did our election special on Wednesday, Thursday. And one thing that Mark Malloch-Brown said seems to have generated a lot of comment online among our listeners. He said something along the lines that Ukraine has been pulling the West, the US, especially Biden, by the nose for the last 2 years. And there's a lot of people that are saying, you know, great podcast. I really disagree with that one comment. And I have to say, we kind of looked at each other in the studio when he said that. We were a little bit like, But it was such a side issue, and there was so much to cover with the election that it didn't feel worth like having a massive discussion about it in the studio. What do you think?
Well, I was surprised. Mark has been superb on Ukraine for years, and I was pretty taken aback by him using the words time for a negotiated settlement. My view is that the two sides are way too far apart to be countenancing any kind of negotiated settlement. The West is supporting Ukraine because they are fighting. Ukraine is not fighting because the West is supporting them. They are fighting because they believe so passionately that this is their country and that this is a hostile invasion. And I don't think they will stop fighting. And then if you ask yourself, what does Russia want from this war? It's simple. It wants to subjugate Ukraine. You go back to 2014 when they invade Crimea, when they start to encroach on the Donbass. It was because Ukraine was becoming ever more involved in the Western sphere of influence. They were signaling that they wanted to join the EU, and Putin was terrified of that and didn't want it to happen.
Yeah.
So if you do want to even countenance the idea of a negotiated settlement, what would that look like? Well, one argument is that you could freeze the war on current boundaries. But in order to do that, you would be expecting Ukraine to live with the lost territory to Russia without formally conceding it. And in return, they would want major defense support from the West and to join NATO. Biden has said he doesn't want Ukraine to join NATO because his entire shtick throughout this has been about de-escalation. And sure as eggs, Russia would see a NATO member Ukraine on its border as major escalation. So they wouldn't agree to a freeze on those terms. I also think that it's naive because Russia can't sustain this war. It is currently fighting in a way that is completely unsustainable in the longer term. So I just don't think that now is the time to back off and sue for peace. And it's not that I like war. I really, really, really hate war. But I just can't see either side agreeing to a negotiated settlement anytime soon. So as much as I adore and respect Mark, I don't agree with him on that point.
I found it really interesting because it triggered a thought process in me that I was surprised I hadn't had before. And I think actually there is something to what he said. I don't agree. And he did say actually in that passage that the prime directive is not to reward Putin for his aggression. So I don't think he's cooled off from that position. But I do think there is something to what he says. There was, I think, a lack of forethought by the West in conjunction with Ukraine as to what victory looks like, what is realistic, what that will take, and how long it will take. So I do understand his frustration.
The West doesn't want Putin to win, and it hasn't agreed how Ukraine will. And you can't talk about timelines and an exit strategy without talking about how you properly fund the fucking thing. You know, we just haven't sufficiently. Props to countries like Poland and Denmark that are spending enormous sums GDP per capita on defense aid towards Ukraine. But I agree with the central thesis of what you're saying.
What I meant to say is that the aim of total victory did not match the commitment in terms of resources, arms, troops.
It did not. You're quite right.
And so I think, I don't want to put words into Mark's mouth, but I think what he meant is that there hasn't been an independent assessment by the West of the military situation, as if it's their fight. Like, what is the situation? What will it take to win? I think that's what he was getting at. And I found it interesting that I haven't had that conversation with myself at all. I'm still at the stage of that initial outrage and whatever it takes to beat Russia, but then we haven't followed through as governments with whatever it takes.
I agree. And
we've given dribs and drabs.
All I would add is that if Zelensky was listening to this show right now, he would turn around to you and say, they fucking well haven't given me what I've asked for. Alex, we need to move on. We're running really long on the show, and I've got to go and feed Wrigley. Badenoch cabinet, shadow cabinet, has been appointed.
Yeah, you have a lot to say on that, haven't you?
Not a lot, but a bit. Let's go.
I think I would just like to direct listeners' attention to the fact that Marc Francois has been appointed Minister of Defensiveness. Sorry, I misread that. Minister of Defense. When I shared that, I would say 50% of responses to the Best for Britain feed was that I was making a joke. They thought that I was joking about how bad her cabinet appointments have been, that would be the cherry on top of the cake. But no, it's real.
I think it's a front bench post and not technically in shadow cabinet, but yeah.
No, I know.
It's still hilarious.
I know. It's still very, very funny.
So getting into the maybe slightly higher quality level of appointment, Mel Stride as Shadow Chancellor. Very much, I consider this a safe pair of hands, well regarded across the House, not just within the Conservative Party. Let's see how he fares up against Rachel Reeves, but certainly I would say, fair play to you, that's a decent appointment.
Okay.
But come on now, let's go into the next biggie, the big one of state, FCDO.
Oh.
Come
Priti
on.
Patel.
Give it your all, Alex. It's Priti Patel.
I mean, to be honest, I don't understand the thought process by which someone that was sacked for having inappropriate meetings with a foreign government, freelancing, basically.
Yep. And this is when she went to Israel.
Yeah, had business meetings without any civil servant present, without anyone in her department knowing anything about it.
And we all tracked that flight back, knowing she was going to get sacked when she landed.
I really don't know how that then becomes something that qualifies you to be in charge of the Foreign Office. I would have thought it's disqualifying.
Incredible. Well, one person that I'm very glad isn't in Foreign Office is Chris Philp, who's got Home Office. I think keeping him on domestic issues is preferable, given that he exposed himself on TV not knowing the difference between Rwanda and Congo. So he certainly couldn't get FCDO. And he is such a brown noser. He is so keen to please a master. I don't know if you remember this, Alex, but during the Kwarteng disaster budget, he was so excited as, I think he was Chief Secretary to the Treasury at the time, that he tweeted about it being a great day for pound sterling while Kwarteng was still on his feet in the chamber. And straight afterwards, the pound sunk to a 37-year low against the dollar and got perilously close to an all-time low later in the evening. So hilarious appointment to any role given his gap.
I mean, talk about over-promotion, though. He was out of his depth as Treasury Secretary, to be honest. He is at his level in a very junior minister appointment. So Shadow Home Office, I mean... I'd be very happy if I were Yvette Cooper right now.
Interestingly, of course, she didn't give that to Jenrick.
Yeah.
And look, was she...
She gave him Shadow Justice, didn't she?
And it was so close. The race was so close in the end, the final result, that I guess she had to give him something despite their obvious loathing for one another. But she's given him, as you say, Shadow Justice Secretary. So one removed from that frontline role on immigration that Home Office would have given him. But given how determined he is for the UK to leave the ECHR, the European Convention of Human Rights, which, remember, Badenoch refused to commit to, saying she would just do a review, I think that's pretty concerning, because basically, given that ECHR falls within the remit of the Ministry of Justice, maybe signalling her willingness to capitulate to him on that issue.
Yeah.
I don't think she set a trap for him. I think part of the delay in the appointments, and they were slow, and she went out with some really lowball ones first, like Chief Whip, rather than the big guns, I think was because there was a lot of horse trading going over which he would accept, which role he felt was beneath him, etc. And she's probably had to buy him off with saying, go on then, I'll give you justice, which gives you ECHR. What about the other ones? Education? I don't know a huge amount about Trott, to be honest.
Laura Trott, I mean, she's one of those appointments that I don't really understand. I don't think she's ever expressed any thoughts on education, any particular desire to be involved with education. I think she worked for an educational charity at some point very briefly in her past. And it continues this weird tradition of taking people and plopping them into positions in which they've expressed no interest, no special skills, no particular background, no aptitude. And I don't get
come
it.
On,
like,
most of them that had any experience told her to get fucked. Like, you know.
No, look, I get it. I get it. But
they're all like, you're on your own, love.
I get
she
it.
Didn't have many to choose from.
Everything about Trott is finance, economy. That's been her career.
Yeah, she was an accountant, wasn't she?
Yeah, and all her positions have been a progression within the Treasury. So this one is beyond me. I suspect it is as basic and simple as they see her as a good match for Bridget Phillipson, who is a very sort of strong media operator, very good on her feet in the House. Yeah. And so I think they're just matching young professional woman with young professional woman. I think it's as basic as that.
Yeah. Well, look, while we're on the subject of dreadful right-wingers, I think it is worth noting that Farage is right now, as we record this, in Wales. There is a Lee Anderson-led
Oh, he's
reform.
back from the States, is he?
He's come back. He has come from Mar-a-Lago to somewhere in Wales. And it's a Reform UK rally, because they have very much got eyes on doing well in the next set of Senate elections.
Did he post any photos with Trump?
No.
I haven't seen
maybe
any.
He did, but there were a lot of him. Here's me at Mar-a-Lago. Here's me behind
No,
the scenes.
I know, but being invited to the party is not quite at the same
as
level
getting a handshake.
as the gold elevator, and he was really a lot closer to Trump than he is at the moment.
You know, now he's missed out on being appointed as the UK's ambassador to the US, which he was clearly
like that
angling
was
for.
ever going to happen.
Can we just please spare a moment for the people of Clacton, because he might actually show his face there now. I mean, he probably won't, but if he does, I'm so sorry, Clacton. They're in Wales. They're in Wales because UKIP historically did well in Wales. There are a significant chunk of people there prepared to give them a hearing. And there was a poll out today that is so shocking. Welsh Senators voting intention, Labour 30% down 6, Plaid staying consistent on 21, and Reform galloping in to a very close third place on 20%, up 19.
I mean, up 19 because they didn't really have a presence at the last Senate election.
Yes, but they have got the wind in their sails. They believe that this is somewhere under a slightly different voting system where they can pick up some influence within the Senate, and they're going for it. I thought that was worth a mention.
Do we know how Reform UK did in Wales in the general election? Because that seems a closer comparison than comparing them to the last Senate election.
Yes, we do. They came third. So Labour came first, Tory second, and Reform UK third on vote share. And they polled nearly 17% of the vote, just behind the Tories on 18, Labour way out in front on 37.5. They have done well there, and they clearly
so that makes more sense to me.
Yeah,
that makes more sense to me. So they've basically taken another 2-3 points from the Tories and leapt over them. So that's going to be interesting to watch, won't it?
And another place that's interesting to watch is Ireland.
Oh.
Prime Minister Simon Harris has announced a snap election for Friday, the 29th of November, in a bid to extend his Fine Gael's party's record 14-year run in power. He's going to the polls now rather than waiting until the official deadline in March next year because of two key things. So, for listeners unfamiliar, Ireland is going to be running a €25 billion budget surplus this year.
Fuck me.
Largely due to huge tax windfalls it's got from Apple and Google. So with respect to Apple, the EU's highest court ruled that Apple had benefited from an illegal sweetheart tax deal. Ireland said, we don't want the money back. We don't want the tax back. They got it nonetheless. And then a separate ECJ ruling in September brought a very long-running case with Google to a close, with them being ordered to pay €2.4 billion for market dominance abuse. Now, Ireland has got one of the lowest corporate tax rates in the EU, and the Irish government didn't want the money back because it felt the losses were worth it to make the country attractive for foreign direct investment, large companies to headquarter their European operation there. And even though corporation taxes are set nationally and are not subject to the EU's jurisdiction, the EU does have extensive power to regulate state aid. And that was what got them on this. They found that by applying very low tax rates to Apple, Ireland was essentially granting them an unfair
it was the
subsidy.
equivalent of a subsidy.
Right. So that's the first thing to remember, which meant that they were able to do a tax-cutting budget in October. And it's tucking 2.2 billion of cash into voters' pockets just in time for Christmas. So they've had a bounce from that. They want to capitalise on it. And that has coincided with a collapse in support for Sinn Féin, the main opposition party, with all of its many scandals that you can hear much more about if you go back.
We'll drop a link to the brilliant episode that you did with Amanda Ferguson, because it really is, I mean, the 5 separate ones.
Incredible.
Completely separate. I mean, 2 are related, but the other three are completely separate.
And actually, there's been more since. So we probably have to do an update, and we'll do another Ireland special capturing all of that. A couple of other things to just remember. This is another election under boundary changes like we had in 2024, new boundaries. The next parliament is going to be expanding from 160 members to a record high of 174 parliamentarians. That is because of the rapid population growth that Ireland has experienced. And the number of constituencies is going to grow from 39 to 43. And the voting system they use is different. So each district elects between 3 and 5 members. Voters pick multiple candidates in order of preference. Ballots get recounted dozens of times, and then you distribute vote transfers. And that's quite a slow process. It can take several days to determine winners of the final seats in each constituency. But if there was an election today, polling suggests that it will be another grand coalition of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, because both polling about 25% and 20% respectively, and Sinn Féin has dropped right down to 18% from a peak earlier this year of 26%. But it is worth noting that independent candidates have been really steadily rising throughout the year to 20%. But hey, if we learned anything this week, it is that the pollsters can get support for incumbents badly wrong. So we'll keep a watching brief on it and give you another update soon.
I mean, if you go as far back as October 2022, Sinn Féin were on 36%.
Indeed, so they've halved their support.
36%, which is just an extraordinary drop. Interesting election to watch. And the German government has also collapsed.
Not another one.
Not another one. And so there's going to be an election there. Again, I think they're trying to take advantage of certain things that are going on in the polls, maybe knowing that it's only going to get worse.
See, I think that's interesting. I'd love to know why, and I'm really looking forward. I think you're going to do a dive with Annette Ditter, aren't you?
Definitely. I've asked Annette to do either a special or to actually come in the studio, because I wanted to do a full episode at some point. So that will happen in the next few weeks.
Good.
She'll come and explain it all. She did say that now that it's been announced and everything, there's not going to be a lot that happens in the next few days. So,
because I assumed that it was the FDP looking at their poll rating and going, we need to exit this coalition now before we collapse even further, in a way that the Liberal Democrats probably should have come out of their coalition a year before polling day. So I assumed that was the rationale.
I mean,
but yeah, it'd be fascinating to see, and if the CDU are going to make a big comeback, and I'm gagging to know more about it.
I mean, the CDU-CSU will make a big comeback. There is no one near them in the polls at the moment. They're on 32%, and the next closest party is Alternative für Deutschland on 17%, and they're dropping. So they're on the decline at the moment. The SPD actually is, the Social Democrats, is picking up a little bit right now. So weirdly, if I were to give a very early prediction of what Ireland and Germany might look like in the next few months, I think we will end up with two grand coalitions, which are actually fairly orthodox in those two countries.
If you've just jinxed it, I'm going to murder you.
Yeah, so I look forward to Annette coming in and telling me why I'm wrong about everything. And, you know, there's also some very, very interesting new parties entering the fray that we discussed in the last special that we did with Annette, like the BSW, which is run by this extraordinary woman that combines really far left elements and really far right elements. A sort of incredibly left socialist economic policy combined with really hostile anti-migrant and socially conservative anti-LGBT elements.
And I think anti-vax as well.
Yeah, and so they're going to be, I think, Sarah Wagenknecht will be a person to watch in this coming election, because I suspect that she represents quite a challenger to the AfD, and that will be very interesting to see. Quiet Riot. And that's it for this week's Quiet Riot Sunday School. It turned out to be quite a bumper edition. I guess there's...
I love these ones.
Me too. It feels
I really enjoy you and me chewing the fat.
it feels very decompressing to look over the week that's been and just unpack little elements of it. So yeah, I love it too.
Remember, you can follow us on social media, including Blue Sky at Quiet Riot Pod, or email us on quietriotpod@gmail.com.
And it falls to me once again to encourage you to support us on ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod. And that's because Naomi, as an English person, basically hates asking for money. And I, as a Greek person, am quite used to it.
Well, thank you all so much for listening. Thank you for sticking with us through the tough times, and may sunnier, more prosperous electoral fortunes lie in front of us.
Oh, they do. They do. The wheel, it turns. That's the one thing you can say with absolute certainty.
And in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. We'll be back again very soon. We love you lots. Goodbye for now.
Love you.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith, Alex Andreu and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta, artwork by Simona Canelu. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Soundstone Global.
Quiet Riot. And loads more of the bonus episodes have come from suggestions on... sorry, that fucking bike. Oh no, it's not bike, it's fucking fireworks. Why is there fireworks today? Sorry, Naomi.
It's all right. I've already made the shepherd's pie for tonight. I just have to heat it up.
I haven't cooked, but I'm not making something that takes a hell of a long time, so... Oh, come on, enough now.
They've started round here now. Oh, bloody hell.
Okay. And several more bonus episodes have come from suggestions on the Discord. Oh, fucking hell.
Hey.